Good morning everybody and welcome to another webinar. Today we're doing part 5 of our Tapping In series. It is accessible tourism and events and why it is worth investing in. Now, accessible tourism and events is a really big passion of mine. Okay, living here in the southwest of WA, we have some amazing events happening. Okay, and we have some amazing spots for people to go and see. And in fact, as you'll find out, our region actually quite relies a fair bit on tourism. Now, the problem is that not a lot of businesses actually understand the market needs of people with impairment. So that's what we're going to focus on today. All right, so let's move the coffee out of the way so I don't spill it over, and here we go. So welcome everybody. 30 Foot Drop acknowledges the traditional owners of country throughout Australia and recognise the continuing connection to land, waters and communities. We pay our respects to them and their cultures, and to elders both past and present. Must always remember that under the concrete and asphalt, this land is, was and always will be traditional Aboriginal land. We would also like to acknowledge the Department of Communities Disability Services for funding this and so many other initiatives like it. Without their support, many projects such as Two Wise Monkeys would never actually see the light of day. And as a community, we would be so much poorer for it. So this webinar has been developed as part of the Realities and Advantages of Access Inclusion Grant that was awarded to 30 Foot Drop as part of the Information Linkages and Capacity Building Grants of 2018 to 2019. Now, before we get into the information, we have a little bit of housekeeping that we need to go through. Unfortunately, we don't have the resources to monitor all of our live streams during the sessions. Okay, so currently we are streaming in a few different platforms, but we only have the resources to monitor the chat on one. So if you want to interact live with us, if you have any questions that you want to ask or something similar, please head to www.30footdrop.com.au/live. And there you will find another version of the live stream along with the chat box underneath. And that's the one that we're going to be monitoring. We're also going to be covering a lot of information in a short period of time, as we do with all of our webinars. So we recommend that attendees take actions to minimise distractions, please. If you really enjoy what we do today, or you just think that we're awesome, please tag us into any social media that you do in relation to us, or jump on there, give us a rating, a review. They all really help with us. And we have a YouTube channel, okay? Jump on there and subscribe and chuck the notification bell on there, because we've got some really awesome content coming up soon that people, I'm just really excited about it, and I think everybody else will be too. So please jump on them and have a look. But speaking of the YouTube channel, we're actually recording this session as well. So if you want to go back and actually review it, or you don't have time to be here for the entire session, a copy will be uploaded to our YouTube and Vimeo libraries. Okay, so you can jump on there and have a look. And if you know of anybody who could really benefit from these sessions, please let them know about it or direct them towards our libraries to have a look. Now, at the end of this webinar, we have a survey for attendees to complete. Please take the time to fill this out. It's a very short survey, okay? It is 6 questions and it helps us immensely. A link to the survey can be found on the 30footdrop.com.au/live page. And if you scroll down the bottom, there's some buttons leading to surveys. Okay, this is the part 5 webinar, so if you could do the survey for that, that'd be great. All right, so quick introduction. For those that don't know who I am, I'm Ben. I am Managing Director of 30 Foot Drop. I'm also a C5 quadriplegic and the Wise Monkey See No Evil. I am See No Evil because it is very obvious that I have an impairment, okay? And the aim of today is, through hearing my story and the information that I impart to you, that you will leave this webinar seeing no evil about impairment. My co-presenter Lisa, who does some of the other webinars, she is Hear No Evil. Now, I'm not going to get into her story because I think it's amazing and the way she tells it is really great, but she has an invisible impairment. Unless she actually tells you, you have no idea. Okay, and that is often the problem with a lot of invisible impairments. So that is why Lisa is See No Evil, because she needs to tell you the story. You need to be able to hear the story in order to know that she has an impairment. And by the time she's finished with the webinar, you will hear no evil about impairment and disability. But wait, isn't there normally 3 wise monkeys? See no evil, hear no evil, speak no evil. Who's going to be the 3rd monkey? You guys. By the end of the day, with the information that you take away from here and the learnings that you take with you, hopefully you will speak no evil about disability impairment, because at the end of the day, we're all humans. And in our particular case, we are also a market. A market that businesses, if they do the right thing, can make money out of. Okay? So, before we dive into the accessible tourism market, let's have a look at the outline and method. I'm skipping ahead. So let's have a look at what we're going to focus on today in this webinar. Okay, so there's a lot to learn about people impairment and the potential impact on your business. First up, we're going to have a look at the most recent Australian research so that you can understand the size of the accessible tourism market here in WA. Then we will break into this market segment and examine the characteristics and habits of them. So that way you can gain a deeper understanding as a business person as to what it is this market needs in order for your business to be attractive to them. Then we will finish off with an open forum session where you can ask any and all questions. Okay? And we really mean any and all. We are all about open, honest conversation here. Okay? Now, you'll notice that there is very little written content on my slides. This is because you're actually here to interact with me. Okay? I'm not a believer in death by PowerPoint. Now, in order to facilitate this, I really encourage you guys to head over to www.30footdrop.com.au/live. Okay? That way you can actually interact with us, because it's a lot of fun. Okay? And whilst you're there, you can ask any questions. Okay? The questions do not have to be related to today's webinar. Okay? As you can see from the sign behind me, whoops, I'll lean the other way. We are all about educating the community through open, honest conversations. All right, before we dive into the information, I just want to do a quick terminology review to make sure that there is no confusion, that you understand what I'm saying. Okay, so the first bit of terminology I like to look at is the difference between a disability and an impairment. Okay, these are 2 words that are often used interchangeably, but in fact they're actually 2 completely different things. And in the case of one of these words, it's actually being used incorrectly. So, first up is impairment. Okay, impairment is an injury, illness, or congenital condition that causes or is likely to cause a loss or difference of physiological or psychological function. In short, an impairment is your medical diagnosis. Okay, so my impairment is that I am a C5 quadriplegic with post-traumatic stress in remission. Okay, that is my impairment. Now, a disability, on the other hand, is actually the loss or limitation of opportunities to take part in society on an equal level. Okay, and it's often due to social and environmental barriers. So the impairment is internal, it is what is different about me, and a disability is external, is the barriers that prevent somebody from being able to actually take part in society. Now, if you actually think about it, it is as the word implies. A disability makes you unable or disables you from being able to participate. Something to think about, and it's quite an interesting distinction. The next one I like to look at is the difference between access and inclusion. A lot of businesses, they talk about access and inclusion like it is one homogeneous word, okay? That it all means exactly the same thing, but it doesn't. Access and inclusion mean 2 completely different things. And as a result, you get a half-assed version of both. So, Access refers to the removal or reduction of barriers, both physical and attitudinal, to participation in the activities and functions of a community. Okay? At its core, access focuses a lot on the physical world around us. And as a result, it is easily assessed because there are checklists, there are standards, there's all sorts of information out there which can actually show you how to make your business more accessible. Okay, so that focuses a lot on the physical. Like I said, really easy. A lot of businesses focus on that, and government departments as well. Inclusion, on the other hand, is a psychological state of being. It's a process whereby every person who wishes to can participate fully in all aspects of an activity or service, irrespective of age, disability, gender, religion, sexual preference, nationality, or impairment. Okay, so it's where it's the process whereby every person can participate fully in all aspects of an activity or service in the same way of any other member of the community. Okay, it's about knowing that your opinion is valued. It is about knowing that you are not there as a charity case. Okay, so access is physical a lot of the time, inclusion is psychological a lot of the time. Hope that's made sense to everybody. If it hasn't, please, and at any time today, if you have questions, I really urge you once again to go to www.30footdrop.com.au/live, okay, and use the chat box there. So, if you have any questions, head there. But for now, let's get on with today's webinar. Okay, so I'm going to focus a bit on the Southwest tourism stats. Now, these are really interesting stats, and they actually transfer very closely to the other regions around WA. The only place that it doesn't transfer as well is the Perth CBD, but, and this is a big but, it is still very, very relevant there. Okay, so these stats are being taken from the Southwest 2017 Visitor Fact Sheet and Economic Contribution of Tourism to West Australian Tourism Regions, both produced by Tourism WA. Okay, and you can find them both in the 30-foot drop resource library, which I actually forgot to mention during our introduction. Everything that we reference here today is available on the 30-foot drop digital resource library. Okay, so if you want to look deeper into these stats, or if you want to delve deeper into any of the subjects that we cover, head there and have a look. So during the 3 years from 2014 to 2016, the Southwest region had an average of 2.49 million overnight visitors per year. Okay? And that's overnight visitors. That is not including day trippers. Okay? The Southwest region is close enough for day trips. So 2.49 million overnight visitors. That's huge. Each of these visitors stayed on average 3.6 nights in the region. Okay? Now, combine these two, and suddenly the direct and indirect contribution to the Southwest region that tourism played was 14% of our economy. 14%. All right, that's huge. If I remember right, percentage-wise, it is only surpassed by the Coral Coast, which is 18% direct and indirect contribution. Okay, so it's a lot of money. And tourism accounts for almost 1 in 5 people employed within the Southwest region. Okay, once again, only surpassed by the Coral Coast of WA, which is approximately 1 in 4. Okay, so tourism plays a major part in our state. Okay, yes, resources bring in a lot of money, but tourism is still vital to our region. So now that we can see how big a role tourism plays within our state, let's have a look at the accessible tourism market. Now, these stats have all come from a report called Accessible Tourism in Victoria and Queensland. It was done This was published by Tourism Research Australia, and in conjunction with each state's tourism departments. Unfortunately, at the time of recording, no research has been released that focuses on WA's accessible tourism market, but this report also focuses on Australia as a whole. Okay? Now, something to bear in mind when I go through these stats, okay, is that it only looks at the domestic market. Okay? This doesn't include any international travellers or tourists. So the numbers are likely higher once you actually factor in international visitors. So due to the similarities between the Southwest tourism market and those of Victoria and Queensland, I've actually extrapolated the findings to calculate the following information. Okay? So this study estimates that the size of the accessible tourism market for overnight and or day trips is about 7% or 1.3 million people Australia-wide. Okay? Now, this 7% is people who require accessible tourism goods and services. There are impairments out there that don't require any specialised or any different sort of setups in order to actually access tourism goods and services. So 7%, that's 1.3 million. Now, if you extrapolate that to WA, there's about 150,000 in Western Australia alone who require accessible goods and services. Okay, 150,000. In a state our size, that is a lot. But bear in mind though, that 7%, although on its own doesn't sound like much, like most of us, like most people, we very rarely travel alone, this 7%, okay? There's actually an average party size of 2.45 for overnight travel and an average party size of 2.62 for day trips, okay? So once you take an account of those, this market actually goes out to around 17% of the population requiring accessible goods and services. Accessible tourism and events, goods and services. Haha, there it is. Which is huge. So that's 390,000 of the West Australian population. Okay? That's massive. That really is. Now the estimate of annual expenditure for this segment comes to currently approximately $8 billion Australia-wide, which equates to $916 million in WA and $163 million here in the Southwest. Okay? That's a sizable amount of money. It's a sizable market segment. Now, very similar to, actually no, I won't get into that because that is the next segment. So, now that we can see that there is a market size, the problem is that, as we found out in part 3 of the webinar series, this is a segment of the population that is currently being underserved. Okay? And the tourism segment is exactly the same, or the tourism industry is exactly the same as all the others. Okay? So this report noted that there is a segment of Australians with an impairment, including adults who care for a child with an impairment, who are not currently travelling. Okay? But they would likely travel with certain industry improvements. Okay? Especially in the areas of accommodation, transport and current technologies, alongside many others. In WA, this segment is estimated to be 34,000 people. Okay, 34,000 people out there that aren't currently travelling. It's an untapped little gold mine. Okay? This equates to approximately $225 million WA-wide of people who are not currently travelling. That as a business, if you are to slightly modify your practices so that you can offer accessible tourism and events, well, it's a nice little market to tap into. It's a good little niche. And you know what? This actually represents a large boost when you consider the current size of the market. I calculated that Australia-wide, it would take the accessible tourism market, the contribution of it, from 8 billion to 9.5 billion Australia-wide. Okay, huge numbers. So now that we've seen the stats, okay, let's actually have a look at understanding the market, okay? Because it's one thing to know that there is a market there, but in order to tap into that market, you need to know more about it. So let's have a closer look at understanding the market. So, first point. Although people with an impairment generally have lower incomes than average for the population as a whole, they should never be considered low income. Okay? More than 1/4 of those who are identified as having an impairment are actually in the top two income categories. Okay? And that is a disposable income above $900 a week. Okay? 1 in 4 are in that top two bands. There are people out there who are doing it. Add on top of that as well, with the introduction of the NDIS, the amount of disposable income that is actually at the fingertips of people with impairment is growing. So the Accessible Tourism Survey, the one for Queensland and Victoria, they found that approximately 55% of the segment that require accessible goods and services have a mobility issue, okay? Now this includes people who use mobility devices and those that have difficulty moving more than a short distance, okay? So it is often the people who have specific mobility requirements that are getting left behind in these cases. The next thing to note when trying to understand this market is that of those in the segment that do not actually travel, 23% of them say it's because it's just too stressful, and 22% of them say it's because it's just too hard. Okay? Now, if a potential customer is finding it too stressful or too hard to access your goods and services, they're not going to spend money. They're not going to buy. Okay? So that's the third thing you should note. The fourth thing you should know is like most of Australians, most travel by people in this segment, okay, is for leisure. Makes sense, doesn't it? If we're going to be traveling, most people do it for leisure. We do it to get away for a little while, to unwind. People with impairment, we are exactly the same. But it was noted that visits to friends and relatives is often preferred because knowing the layout of the accommodation helped with planning, and it resulted in a less stressful trip. As I said, potential customers who find it too stressful, they're not going to spend money. Okay? So maybe there's a little hint for some accommodation providers out there. If you have accessible rooms, maybe publish the layout somewhere that can be easily found. You'd be amazed at how much more business you get as a result. So that's the fourth thing. The fifth thing is that, take a step back. So those are the first four things that we look at. Now, to also further understand the market, we also need to look at what characteristics they share with the broader population, okay? So the first characteristic that they share with the broader population is the tools used in decision making, okay? They're the same as the wider population, with internet search coming in first and word of mouth coming in second. The internet is an amazing tool. And the reason that it gets used so much in this situation, and this is coming from a personal point of view, okay, is that knowing what I'm getting into results in a much less stressful trip. When you have an impairment that can easily stop you from being able to participate in the holiday, you end up doing a lot more research, because if you don't, there's a higher and higher risk. So if you do less research, the risk becomes higher, that you're actually going to waste the resources that you're using to be able to afford this holiday. So research becomes a major thing. The next thing that they share in common is the need for reconnection and unwinding. Okay? They're core needs for all Australian travellers, and this was just as true for travellers with impairment. Okay? Approximately 40% of travellers with an impairment sought to meet these needs through either more active or more emotionally slash intellectually stimulating experiences. Okay? So they share a lot of the same characteristics. So it's not like you're having to completely reinvent the wheel with your goods and services. The third thing to keep in mind, okay, is that although travellers with impairment do slightly fewer activities on average, many of the experiences they participate in match those of the broader travel population. Okay? These include eating out, visits to the beach, as well as nature and cultural experiences. Okay? As I said, you don't need to reinvent the wheel. It is often just a case of slightly changing your practices in order to make it more accessible, to be able to tap into this market. Next thing is that overall, people with impairment tend to stay in the same types of accommodation and visit the same destinations as the broader population. Okay? Wow, who would have thought that people with impairment would like to go on holidays in the same places as everybody else? Oh my God, it's almost as if we're human as well. Interesting. But no, in all seriousness, we like doing the same things as everybody else. It's just often the practices and the layouts of the places that we're going to prevent us from doing that. And as a result, you're missing out on money. The final thing to notice, okay, is that in this survey, they actually had a look at age. Now, it'd be quite easy to look at this survey and go, oh, well, you know, it's obviously mostly going to be elderly people because they're the ones who have all the mobility issues. But you're wrong. Only 14% of the people who were surveyed for this were over the age of 65. 14%, okay? Impairment is not ageist. Impairment can happen to anybody at any time, okay? And you know what? When it comes to looking at accessible tourism and experiences, you need to bear people such as myself in mind because I'm married, I have children, I like to travel. I'm young. Well, I like to say that. I'm 35, so, you know, those who are over 35 say that I'm young, those under 35 say I'm old. Whatever. Anyway, so hopefully that's given you guys some food for thought when it comes to looking at the stats around accessible tourism and the size of the market, and also that it's gotten you to understand the market. So we're going to wrap this up now. I'm going to allow a bit of time for Q&A, but first, for those who aren't going to hang around for the Q&A, I'd like to say thank you very much for coming, okay? And if you get a chance, please head to www.30footdrop.com.au/live, okay, and use the chat box and do the survey there, sorry. The short survey, 6 questions, takes a minute to do, okay? And our next webinar tomorrow is going to be on how to tap into this market. So if you're left sitting there going, wow, there's so much money to be made, how can I do it? We're covering that tomorrow. Now, open forum time. Okay, how I like to do this is giving you guys 5 minutes to use the chat box found at www.30footdrop.com.au/live to ask any questions that you have. Okay, so I'm going to give you guys 5 minutes to go ahead and do that. And then I'll come back and answer any questions, and yeah, we'll go from there. So I will see you at 11:35. And we're back. So it would appear that we've received no questions today, which is absolutely fine. Look, once again, thank you very much everybody for watching. And yeah, make sure you tune in tomorrow for part 6, where we look at some practical information on how an accessible, or how an events and tourism business can actually start tapping into this quite valuable market. So until then, look after yourselves, look after each other, and catch you next time.